You know, I've been walking this path a good long while now. I've sat with presidents, prayed with preachers, listened to billionaires, and heard wisdom from the barber's chair that could humble a university. But sometimes, life comes along and shows you just how much you still don't know. And for me, that happened when I realized I didn't actually know the man, Muhammad. Now, don't misunderstand me. I knew the name. Everyone does. You hear it in headlines, in passing conversations, in debates. But I'd never truly studied him. I'd never looked beyond the sound bites and the talking points people throw around. We live in a world of snippets and summaries, not the full story. So one night, restless as I often get, I found myself thinking, all right, you've been speaking about Islam, about faith. But who was the man at the heart of it all? Who was he really? I picked up a biography, then another. I listened to scholars speak, to everyday believers share stories. And what I found, it didn't just surprise me, it rearranged something inside me. Because let me tell you, based on what you often hear, I expected to read about a fierce conqueror, a stern ruler, a figure of sheer authority. History often paints its giants that way. But what I found was the story of a man who wept when people were hungry, a man who mended his own torn cloak, who swept the floor of his own home, who repaired his own worn shoes, a man who buried his own children and still faced the world with a heart full of compassion. You can't counterfeit that. I sat there thinking, wait a minute, this is the man followed by billions. He lived like this? No throne, no palace guard, no piles of gold, just profound humility, an unshakable heart. And the deeper I went, the stranger it felt, like I was reading about a guide who'd been whispering to my spirit my whole life, and I was only now learning his name. What struck me first was his beginning. Born in Mecca, his father passed before his birth. His mother left this world when he was just 6 years old. So he entered life already acquainted with loss, already shaped by a grief most would use as a reason to become bitter, not better. His uncle raised him, and from his youth they called him Al-Amin, the trustworthy one. Let that sink in. In a whole city, among friends and rivals, rich and poor, that was his name. Not a title given by a king, but a reputation earned in the streets. I've worked in media long enough to know an image can be manufactured, but a reputation built day by day, action by action. That's character. That's substance. That told me everything I needed to know. This man wasn't forged in a palace. He was tempered in hardship, integrity, and quiet faith. Then I read about the revelation. Picture it. You're 40 years old. You've lived a decent, simple life. You're in a cave, seeking clarity, trying to make sense of a broken world. And an angel, Gabriel, appears and commands, "Read." And he responds, "I cannot read." This happened not once, but 3 times. I paused there. It wasn't about literacy. It was about readiness. It was about opening your heart to a truth greater than your own understanding, even when you feel utterly unprepared. And I thought, that's me. I'm no theologian. I'm no scholar. I'm just a man trying to figure it out. But God speaks to those who are listening, not just to those who think they're qualified. Shaken and afraid, he went straight to his wife, Khadijah, and she didn't dismiss him. She didn't call him mad. She wrapped him in her embrace and said, God would never disgrace you. She believed in him.
I kept reading, night after night. And the more I learned, the more I began to question the noise in my own life, the chase for fame, the weight of pride, the politics of ego. His life was a quiet antidote to all that racket. It was like clean, cool air in a stifling room. I read how he would walk with orphans, how he would sit with society's outcasts and make them feel seen, valued, human. I thought, that's the kind of leadership we're starving for today. I've met people from every corner of life. I've seen arrogance dressed in custom suits and humility in a janitor's uniform. But in Muhammad, I found the blueprint for a different kind of success. A success defined not by what you accumulate, but by what you give away. Here was a man who could have claimed every earthly privilege and chose simplicity instead. He chose service over luxury, forgiveness over vengeance, mercy every single time it was harder to give. I ask myself, when was the last time I forgave someone who didn't deserve it? When was the last time I offered kindness to someone who spoke ill of me? My own answers made me uncomfortable. We talk a lot about happiness, about getting ahead. He taught that real fulfillment isn't in what you get, but in what you give. And not the kind of giving that seeks an audience, but the kind that comes from the soul when no one is watching. Another story that stayed with me. A woman made a habit of throwing garbage on him whenever he passed her home, day after day. Then one day, she didn't. He stopped. He asked about her. Told she was ill, he went to her home. He visited her, cared for her, prayed for her. Who does that? That's not just goodness. That's a higher law in motion. It teaches that revenge is a dead end, that anger chains you down. But mercy lifts you up.
Look at our world today. Social media spats, political hatred, the need to always clap back. We want to be right. He chose every time to be righteous. And his treatment of women? I'd never read anything like it from the 7th century. He said, "The best of you are those who are best to their women." He said, "Paradise lies at the feet of your mother." This was 1400 years ago, in an age when women were often treated as property. He didn't just preach respect, he lived it. He helped in his home, sought his wives' counsel, listened deeply. That's not just affection, that's a new paradigm for leadership. A real leader doesn't need to stand on others to feel tall. A real leader lifts others up. That resonated deep within me. As a father of daughters, I thought, if every man lived by this example, the world would be transformed. Then I read about the death of his infant son, Ibrahim. You might expect a prophet to be stoic, unmoved. But he wept. He held his child and cried. When questioned about his tears, he said, "The eyes shed tears and the heart grieves, but we say only what pleases our Lord." That is strength married to surrender. That is a faith that doesn't deny pain, but walks through it, hand in hand with trust. We're often told that faith means pretending you're okay. He showed us that faith is being honest in your grief and trusting God through the tears. Here's what stunned me most. For all his love, his forgiveness, his patience, people still hated him. They slandered him, tried to kill him, exiled him from his home. It made me realize, if the most patient man on earth faced such opposition, what makes any of us think we won't? And in that, I found a new kind of peace. The peace that comes when you understand that people's opinions don't define you. Your purpose does. And his purpose was always bigger than ego, bigger than payback. It was to remind the world that God's mercy is wider than his wrath. One of his sayings stopped me cold. If you trust in Allah as he should be trusted, he will provide for you as he provides for the birds. They leave their nests hungry in the morning and return full in the evening. I stared at those words. That's the kind of faith I've been missing. The kind of peace I've been searching for my whole life. A peace that doesn't come from a bank account or applause, but from a profound, unwavering trust. A pattern emerged. Muhammad wasn't introducing a new religion so much as he was restoring a way of life, a way to live with an unshakable calm inside, no matter the storm outside. He smiled more than anyone, though he suffered more than most. He gave more than anyone, though he owned less than most. He forgave more than anyone, though he was wronged more than most. That's the kind of man you don't follow out of obligation. You follow because his example makes you want to be better. What would our world look like if more of us lived like that? If we prayed for our enemies instead of cursing them? If we saw service, not status, as the ultimate success? I came to understand Islam wasn't spread by the sword. It was spread by character, by honesty that disarmed suspicion, by mercy that melted hostility. And his final words, be mindful of your prayer and be good to those under your care. That was it. That was his entire legacy distilled. Remember God, take care of each other. I thought I was studying history. I was actually learning how to live.
You know what's remarkable? The more I read about Muhammad, the quieter my own inner world became. The noise of ambition, the pressure to perform, the next big thing, it all started to fade into the background. I was looking at a man who possessed everything that matters and nothing the world tells us to chase. He had no palace, no private jet, no legions of fans chanting his name. But he had peace. And that peace didn't come from comfort. It came from connection, a direct, living connection to the divine. I've spent a lifetime trying to make it, trying to climb, to become somebody. This man made it by bowing. He climbed by kneeling. He became great by serving everyone. The world says, speak up, be proud, chase the bag. He whispered, be humble, be content, chase the approval of your Creator. I've known wealth and felt restless. I've received praise and felt empty. I've had the lights, the cars, the stages, and still sensed a void. But reading about him, walking humbly, praying in the deep night, weeping for those who mocked him, I thought, that is a man who knew God, not as a concept, but as a presence. Maybe closeness to God isn't about how many verses you can quote or how large your platform is. Maybe it's about how you treat people when no one is watching. That's what he did. He prayed for those who hurt him. He fed the hungry before himself. He forgave those who sought his life. Anybody can love when it's easy. To love when it's hardest, that's a divine strength. One of his companions said his face was always cheerful and his heart was always remembering God. Always cheerful, even through hardship. I asked myself, Steve, when's the last time you smiled through genuine pain? I've had my struggles, moments when doors slammed shut, when I didn't know how I'd move forward. I used to ask, why me? Now, looking at his story, I wonder if it was never punishment. Maybe it was preparation. Every loss he endured, every betrayal he faced, forged him into the vessel capable of carrying a divine message.
Maybe my own trials weren't meant to break me, but to wake me. Maybe God has been calling all along, and I was just learning how to listen. One story sealed it for me. After years of exile, he returned to Mecca, the city that had driven him out, mocked him, and sought his life. He stood before them, victorious, holding their fate in his hands. And he said, "Go. You are free. No revenge, no pride, just mercy." I closed the book and whispered to the empty room, That is what it looks like to be close to God. It's not loud. It's not showy. It's mercy in motion. If he could forgive them, who am I to hold a grudge? If he could stay humble in total victory, who am I to boast in my small comforts? If he could bow in gratitude 5 times a day, who am I to forget my Creator even once? That's when it crystallized for me. Islam isn't just a set of beliefs. It's a rhythm of bowing, thanking, forgiving, serving. A rhythm that syncs the human soul with its source 5 times a day until peace becomes your resting state. Here was a man who lived over 14 centuries ago, and his light is still reaching people like me. A man from Ohio who thought he'd seen it all, only to realize he was just beginning to see what truly matters. I'd seen success. Now I was beginning to see truth.
I sat alone one final night in the quiet. No cameras, no audience. And I thought about this man, Muhammad, and everything he represented. I asked myself, what have you been chasing, Steve? Because when you get to a certain point, you realize the trophies don't speak back. The cars don't comfort you in fear. The bank balance doesn't pray for your soul. But faith does. Faith fills the emptiness the fame can never touch. And that's what I saw in Islam, through the life of its prophet. A faith that fills, not with things, but with meaning. Not with status, but with peace. It's not what we're all searching for. Peace. The world tries to sell it to us, package it, tell us it comes with retirement or a fat bank account. But peace isn't something you buy. It's something you return to. A place inside you that remembers its origin. I saw that in how he lived, simply, gently. How he laughed with children, honored his neighbors, cared for animals, treated every soul with inherent dignity. The man entrusted with a message for all of humanity chose the path of a servant. If the messenger of God could be that humble, what excuse do any of us have? I remember once standing outside a mosque in Dubai as the call to prayer began. I watched people stop, truly stop. Phones down, conversations paused, all turning toward one direction. I'm not Muslim, but in that moment I felt time itself take a knee. I felt what it means to remember God in a world that is always forgetting. There's a verse, indeed, in the remembrance of Allah, do hearts find rest. I've been chasing rest my whole life, in money, in fame, in achievement. I never found it until I stumbled upon meaning, and meaning came through stories like his. It makes you ask different questions. Not, what do I want next, but what am I doing this for? Not how do I win, but how do I serve? And his example with women. In a world that can still be so cruel, here was a man, 14 centuries past, defining a man's worth by how well he treats his wife. That's a real man. Not defined by power or pride, but by gentleness, by protection, by honor. That's divine masculinity. That's the standard. I try to carry that into my own life now, into how I speak, how I lead my family, how I pray. And when the noise of the world gets too loud, I go back to the story of that man who started with nothing but faith and changed the course of history. If he could trust God through all of that, surely I can trust him through this. Life will knock you down. You'll face loss. You'll fall short. But he taught that even when you fall toward mercy. And that's what I hold on to. Now when I see someone praying, I don't see a difference. I see discipline. I see devotion. I see a mirror reminding me, don't forget who made you.
I don't have it all figured out. I still have questions. I still have flaws. But learning about Muhammad didn't just teach me about Islam. It taught me about myself. It taught me that greatness isn't about standing tall. It's about bowing with sincerity. It taught me that legacy isn't what they say about you when you're gone. It's what you bring before your Creator when you meet Him. He didn't just bring a religion. He brought a reminder, a living, breathing reminder that no matter where you've been, what you've done, or what you've believed, the path back to peace is always open. And maybe that's why when I finished learning his story, I didn't feel judged or confused. I felt invited, as if a door had been held open and a voice was saying, "You see what peace looks like. You're welcome to find yours." I'm still walking that road, but I'll tell you this, ever since that day, I haven't been walking alone. If you ever wonder who the Prophet Muhammad was, don't just read the books. Look at the peace in those who follow his example. Look at their prayer, their forgiveness, their service. Because that light he carried, it never went out.